I am one of the few people who got real deep into Helldivers the original. So today I will be looking through the Helldivers 1 equipment and evaluating what should be added to Helldivers 2 and what should really stay in the first game. Here we go. Quick disclaimer, I won't be discussing any of the stratagems that are currently in Helldivers 2, as that defeats the purpose. Some of these aren't necessarily one-to-one in Helldivers 2, like might have a different name or might be slightly different in function, but the ones in this tier are basically already in the game. So I primarily played this on PlayStation rather than PC, so that's why most of the stuff is locked, but we can still talk about it. I still have used most of this stuff. Starting with the AD-289 Angel. This is a little drone that follows you around, much like a guard dog, except instead of shooting at enemies, it heals you. This thing is pretty vital for escort missions in the first game. It is really, really strong. It can repair vehicles. It realistically is one of the best ways to get along solo in the entire game. Now, Helldivers 2 does have the stims as well as the stim pistol, which does negate the need for this somewhat, but it's still a solid option. I think we're putting the Angel into should be added. Doesn't quite need ASAP because, like I said, we do have stims. We have other means of healing now, but it's still pretty good. Next, we have the anti-personnel barrier. This basically creates a strip of barbed wire that blocks entry from a certain position. Personally, I don't think this would even work in Helldivers 2. Helldivers 1 had a lot more narrow chokes to where you could feasibly slow enemies from an entire cardinal direction by strategically placing one of these. Helldivers 2, that's not really the case. There's a lot more wide open areas where enemies could either walk around this or just not be in its path to begin with. So this one isn't really great. Putting a barbed wire in shouldn't add. It's just not viable for how Helldivers 2 is as a game. Here is a stratagem that is the stealth diver's dream. This is the distractor beacon. You throw this and enemies will be attracted to it and thus not attracted to you. This thing is really, really useful in Helldivers 1, especially if you want to do stealth. This is a mandatory bring. You honestly want to bring multiple charges of this if you're doing stealth in Helldivers 1. It's a really, really decent piece of kit. It also is a piece of stealth-centered equipment, which we don't really have enough of in Helldivers 2 at the moment. I am putting the distractor beacon in ASAP. This really, really should be added. It's a very good thing. The Lumber Exo-suit, the only exo-suit out of the three from the first game that is not in the second. This exo-suit has a flamethrower on one arm and it has a 90mm tank cannon on the other arm. I would imagine if this were added to Helldivers 2, it would be roughly similar to the anti-tank emplacement. That's how it is in the first game. All in all, I think it should be added. It's a fairly novel. It's definitely the most interesting of the exo-suits since it's got the really, really close range light target flamethrower and then you've got the big heavy anti-tank cannon. Definitely, this would be very interesting for them to add. And while it would be interesting for them to add, it's not necessarily vital for them to add. Like, the game doesn't need this, but it would be nice for them to add this. The Humblebee UAV drone, this for me was a mandatory bring, especially when farming for samples. This just reveals where all the samples are on the map. This is a no-brainer that this should be added to Helldivers 2. It just is a version of the radar tower that you bring with you as a stratagem in case the radar tower doesn't show up in your mission. It steals one of your stratagem slots, but it makes it a lot easier to find samples and other points of interest. The UAV drone is going into ASAP. This is a thing I would have expected them to have on launch, to be honest with you. Really, 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 really hope that they are considering adding this to Helldivers 2. Next, we have the Rumbler, which is a mortar that shoots gas grenades. Now, I know the Wasp in Helldivers 2 has a mortar function as a firing mode, so this would essentially be, I interpret it as like a toxic version of the Wasp, so instead of explosive, it's gas. I think that would be a decent addition for extra variety, but on the same token, it's not something we really need per se, but more gas weapons would be neat since there's relatively few of them currently. This is going in nice to add. Not something we really, really need, but it would be nice. Consulting the wiki because I don't actually have this unlocked on PC, but this is the M532 HAV, Heavy Assault Vehicle. This is basically an APC with a big tank gun on the front that can aim in a 360-degree arc around the vehicle. It is a godsend for fighting against the cyborgs in Helldivers 1. Helldivers 2, it would be the bots, the automatons. But that cannon, plus there's 2 sponson mounted machine guns on either side. This would be a blast in Helldivers 2. Just amazingly fun. The M532 is going into should be added. We don't really need it per se. It's not something that a major flaw in the game is covered up by adding it, but the M532 would be an incredibly fun stratagem for them to add, and certainly a war bond seller, if it ends up in one, I would hope they would just give it out for free, but either way, definitely should be added. Next, we have the little brother of the M532, the M5 APC. This one has, instead of a tank cannon on the top, it has an auto cannon on the top. Still pretty decent, still pretty good. Not quite as good as the M532 in my personal opinion, but still lots of fun to run around with, especially when you have 4 people in the vehicle, all manning every gun plus the driver. The plain old M5 is going in, should be added just behind the M532. I don't really think that both of these necessarily should be added. They're a bit redundant when compared to each other. I think if we get one, we should get the M532, but either or, I think adding one kind of negates the need for the other. Next, my beloved, the meme-tastic, fantastic MC-109 Hammer motorcycle. It's got a sidecar. You drive around. It's got a machine gun. It's kind of shit, but man, is it one of the most fun war bonds in the first game. I get that it's a 2, possibly 3-person vehicle, so that would present some problem with adding it to Helldivers 2, but come on, man. It's a motorcycle with a sidecar. We really, really need this shit, just for the fun of it. The motorcycle is going into top of ASAP. It's just too much fun. Sure, you would die. Sure, it would be like tissue paper. Sure, it would flip over. I don't care. It's so much fun. This is a bit of an odd duck, the MGX-42 machine gun. This goes off of the staggered ammo, electrically primed thing, where you have multiple rounds of ammunition in each barrel that are then fired in sequence via electricity. There's actually real-life examples of this. The gimmick of this weapon in Helldivers 1 was that it's a machine gun, but it's disposable. So you can't reload it, but you can call it in unlimited times. Now, in Helldivers 2, all machine guns can be called in unlimited times. So that, in large part, negates the need for this. Sure, they could add it, but they would basically be adding a completely different thing. As far as the spirit of the weapon goes, it's not really gonna come back in the same way that it was in the first game, just because all machine guns can be called in multiple times, which was the main purpose of this thing. This one's going into shouldn't add. Helldivers 2 is just laid out differently than Helldivers 1. The main purpose of this gun no longer exists. If they were to add it, it would be modified to the point of not even really being the same thing, because the purpose that it used to serve is now served by every machine gun in the whole game. So really, it doesn't have much reason to exist. The REC-6 Demolisher. So this is basically a explosion pack C4 remote detonator thing. You carry it around. It uses up your heavy weapon slot. You throw it, and then you walk away from it, and you detonate it. Pretty much kills whatever you throw it at if you throw it at it properly. This was really good in the first game for destruction-based objectives, because it would more reliably take out certain objectives than some of your anti-tank weaponry would. This was a good option in the first game, at least as a stratagem. I don't think it should make it into the second game. Maybe as a grenade, like you can't throw it very far, but it does packs a lot of punch and you can remote detonate it. That's possible, but at least in terms of adding it faithfully as a stratagem like it was in the first game, I don't think that's really necessary. With that said, I do think it would be fun for them to add it, so I'll put this one in take it or leave it. Personally, I think that using up your stratagem slot for what is essentially a eat it that has multiple charges but is really, really close range doesn't really sound like something that we super duper need. However, if it got added as a grenade, then that's where I think would be a really good spot for this to be in. The Rep 80. Now, this one is an interesting one, because on the surface, you may think, oh, well, we already have the stim pistol, so why use something that takes up your heavy weapon slot in order to just be able to heal people? Well, not only can this heal players, this can heal turrets, this can heal vehicles, this can heal anything that has a health bar that is friendly. So not only would this solve a big problem of the existing vehicles, is that they get beat up and then destroyed fairly easily with no real ability to recover them. This could be an interesting option for people who want to be able to repair their vehicles to keep them in the fight longer, especially if they coincided this with a vehicle resupply stratagem. That would be a decent option. Putting this one at the bottom of should be added, especially if they added the angel. That kind of negates a lot of the reason for this thing existing, because the angel would be able to do the same thing without taking up your heavy weapon slot. And since backpacks are more prone to utility anyway, I think adding both of these doesn't really make sense. And if you're going to add one, I think the angel would be the one to add, but it still would be decent. The Shredder Missile. This is essentially a nuke launched via a big ass missile. Possibly, it really depends on, is this launched from your super destroyer or is this launched from an eagle? If it's launched from the super destroyer, it has a place for being, because this would be a equivalent to the 500 kilogram bomb, but for orbital strikes. So there is a use case for that, and that, let's say you want to save your quick use rapid things for your eagle. So that way when your eagle's rearming, it's resupplying all of those, but you want your big heavy explosion on a separate cooldown from that. That would be the niche that I think this could fit in if it's launched from the orbital. If it's launched from a eagle, that makes it a lot less useful. We already have the 500 kilogram, which pretty much does the same thing as this. So realistically, it's going to depend a lot on that. For the purposes of this, we're going to assume it's added as an orbital stratagem, in which case we will put it in the middle of nice to add. I think it would be a good quality of life thing to have something like the 500 kilogram, but as an orbital stratagem rather than a eagle, just so that you can decide what you want on what type of cooldown. Last but certainly not least, the TD-110 Bastion. The Bastion is kind of like a Stug. It's a tank, but the turret can only traverse in the front 45 degrees of the vehicle. However, that turret is massive. I think this would be a decent option to be added. It has a coaxial machine gun. The driver operates the tracks, the gunner operates the gun. Fairly simple layout. I think it would be really cool, especially considering how we have the urban maps. So for those long streets, this would be pretty useful. Same thing goes for factory strider convoys. This would be useful for that as well. Definitely would be pretty fun. I would put this in the top of nice to add, especially if the M532 ends up being added. I don't think necessarily both of these have a place in the current landscape of the game, but at the very least, adding one would be really decent. Adding both would be the best option, but development resources are finite, and I think that the M532, if they're going to add one of these three and not add the other two, the M532 is the one of those to add. And that is the end of the tier list. It's really surprising how few stratagems are in Helldivers 1 that haven't already been added to Helldivers 2, but there's still a decent chunk of them. And I think that they're definitely, especially that ASAP tier, all of those I think should have been in on launch realistically. Not blaming the devs. You know, development resources are finite. I get it. There's bigger fish to fry. But as far as adding new stuff, those three, the UAV, the distraction beacon, and the motorcycle, I think would be the three best stratagems from the first game for them to add. Tune in next week for the weapons tier list.